at the beginning of class. There we go. Okay, we're going to tip that. So let's start out by talking about the papers. I just looked at everybody's outline. You know, if you didn't bring your outline, it's fine. I just wanted to know that you knew what was going on, and I didn't want you to be floundering. When I said go home and write a paper, I didn't want you to feel like, I don't even know where to start. You should know where to start because you should have an outline, and it looks like everybody, or it sounds like everybody does. Yes, Jesse? Oh, no, I don't need to. It wasn't so much that I wanted to check it as I wanted to make sure everyone was comfortable with the assignment and everybody had organized the material, you know, in a way that made sense. And so if you don't have it, but you're not having any trouble with it, you feel totally confident, it's fine. We are going to just use that. We're going to write that. Now, this is going to sound a little, I don't know, awkward, because what you're going to write for me is the beginning of a persuasive essay, okay? We're just basically doing the body part. You know, it's not going to have an introduction. We're going to talk about that later. You're just literally going to write out the 3 paragraphs. So it's going to start in the middle, you know. Aeneas should leave Dido because the gods told him to. It's like, okay, apparently we're talking about Aeneas and Dido. There's no introduction. And that's on purpose. If you were doing a full persuasive essay, we would add an introduction and a conclusion, and we would refute some of the arguments from the other side. But we're just starting out with step 1. So don't worry. It sounds a little abrupt and awkward. It's fine. It's because it's really not a whole paper. It's just part of a paper. And so you're fine with that. And if you have an outline, you so have a paper, because all you basically have to do is turn those things back into sentences. But I do want you to include our figures of speech. And we're going to add a new one this week. All right. So if you want to jot these down again to remind you, that's great. Our first one was a simile. Somebody tell me what a simile is. Rhett, what is a simile? Like or as. And what, comparing anything? Things with only one thing in common. If you compare 2 things that are very, very much the same, it's really not a simile anymore. One of my students, and I don't remember who you are. I don't know if you're in here on Tuesday. I swear, I don't remember who does what. I don't hold a grudge against you because you made a mistake on your paper. Anyway, somebody said that the Romans ate leftovers like we eat leftovers today. That's not really a simile. That's not, well, let's not groan. We all do groaners. We all do groaners sometimes, okay, when we write. But that's not really a simile. That's just an observation of a fact. But if, you know, we say the Romans hated leftovers like they hated, that's not even a good simile. I don't know how to turn that into a good simile. I made a suggestion on the paper, and unfortunately, I don't remember what my suggestion is anymore. But they need to be 2 things that are not. So I need to have a food simile. Romans ate garum, a fish sauce, as stinky as, you know, like a septic tank. It's pretty stinky. I don't know if it's as stinky as a septic tank. All right. So the fish sauce and the septic tank have absolutely nothing in common except the smell. And well, and but I don't know. I don't think the fish sauce was poisonous, but it was definitely kind of nauseating. So that would be a simile. So keep working on that. For if similes are hard for you, this is a real imagination exercise, right? To think of something that is, it reminds you of, or it's alike in only one way, but you can't say, you know, my beagle was like a basset hound. That's no, they're practically the same. I know they're practically the same. They're very similar though, with the long ears, right? Our dog breeds. Okay, so work on your simile. We're doing alliteration. And what is alliteration? Dalton. You just did it with the same sound at the start. Boom, you did it in your definition, that gold star to Dalton. Yes, remember, same sound, not necessarily same letter. So shell and chandelier alliterate, even though one is CH and one is SH. No, because sh and s, different sound. Remember, similes, when we talked about similes appeal to your imagination and alliteration appeals to your ear. Because back in the day, everything was read out loud. People didn't read to themselves quietly. You read everything out loud. Okay. Next thing was the ing opener, which we are still working on.
Who did it, Jared?
No, you know, not even be correcting your gerund on occasion. But remember, it's a verb form. So I got in a paper, I got a during. During is an ing. It is a word and it ends in ing. So it's got two yeses, but it's not a verb. It's got a big fat no. It has to be a verb form: running, playing, dancing, singing, eating, sleeping. And then it is describing the subject. It isn't the subject. So if I say driving in the snow is nerve-wracking. See, driving is the subject. What is nerve-wracking? Driving is nerve-wracking. Do you see that? But if I say driving in the snow, I kept my hands tight on the steering wheel. All right, who's driving? I am the subject of the sentence. But honestly, the whole point of this, it's partly to teach us about participles and gerunds, but it's mostly to vary your sentence structure. Writing gets really boring if you just start with a subject all the time. And unfortunately, if you use a gerund one where it's the subject, you're starting with the subject again, because we tend to do that. And it just makes our writing sort of drone on. But when we sometimes start with a different sort of construction, it makes it exciting. Okay, here's our new one. It is called antithesis. Did you ask me, Rhett, if we were doing antithesis? And I said, I don't think so? Or was that something else? Parallelism, okay. All right, did we do antithesis last year? Okay, awesome. I didn't think so. I wanted to try new things. Okay, so write this down, and I'm going to give you a definition. Placing two ideas together that are opposing or opposites. I'll explain what I mean by all of that. And then I'm going to give you an example to write, okay? Placing two ideas together that are opposing ideas or opposite ideas. You know, two words or ideas. That's a little thing that means those words go there. Do you know? It's called a carrot, but it's not spelled like the vegetable. It's spelled like this. In Latin, it means it is lacking. It is missing. That's what cario means, to be deprived of or to lack in Latin. It is missing. And so when you put a carrot, I mean, this is missing. It is missing. So I'm putting it in. You do not have to write any of that down, by the way. It's not important for you to remember at all. It's just an extra. Okay. I don't want to keep talking while people are writing. I'm going to erase the other things so I can write my example above. Okay. So for here's I'll write my example and then we'll analyze it. In the summer, I drink ice cold, I was going to say lemonade, but whatever beverage of choice, okay? But wintertime makes me long for hot cocoa. Here's my example. So, is everybody with me? Hey, guys. So, what are opposing ideas that I set side by side? Winter, and there's another set. Ice, cold, and hot. So I did actually a double antithesis. They don't have to be technically opposites like hot and cold are. But, lemonade and cocoa are sort of opposing ideas. One is always served cold. You don't do warm lemonade. And if you serve cocoa not hot, it's called chocolate milk. It's not cocoa anymore, right? So they don't have to be technically opposites like summer, winter, hot, cold. I'm going to give you an example that we're going to use Dido and Aeneas in. But it's anytime I set two ideas or concepts together and they're against each other to set them off from each other. The ceilings in the room were so lofty that the sound echoed, but the students at the tables huddled together in a conclave of studious enlightenment. Okay, so we have the idea of the big spacious room and the students collected together close. Do you see what I mean? Those are opposites, but they're two ideas that are separated from each other and we're setting them side by side. Dido loved Aeneas with a burning passion, but Aeneas easily laid her aside to pursue his destiny. Do you see? There's no opposite there. I mean, it is kind of. One's crazy in love, one's not. But I put side by side two ideas. Aeneas's men approached Carthage with fear and trembling lest they be thrown in prison or killed. But Dido came out graciously and greeted them and offered them snacks. Okay, that was a bad ending. But do you see? So there's the fear versus the graciousness. All right. Does everybody understand what I mean? I'm telling you, the best authors and speakers love this. If you learn this, you will start reading things and you will see it over and over and over. I started my class last night. I'm a student now. I have 2 papers due this semester. I already know what I'm going to do. But last night, and our first thing is talking about rhetoric, and we were talking about the figures of speech. So I've been analyzing of 9 speeches I have to go through. I have to pick one and write a paper on it. And these figures of speech that I'm teaching you, like in Lincoln's inaugural speeches and Shakespeare's speech, they all pop up over and over. It makes your writing pop to do stuff like this. And if your reader is educated and knows, he did an antithesis and it was awesome, it makes them admire you. If they don't know what they did, it's still like, I don't know how they did it, but that sounds great. I love that sentence. You don't know why, but it's great. So 2 opposing words or ideas, they can be straight up opposites, but they can just be opposing ideas or feelings, like the men's fear versus Dido's gracious reception of them. Those aren't opposites, but they are opposing. They're at different poles of the spectrum. Yes, Jesse. Now it's got a name. Boom. I'm sorry that you didn't make it up. If you thought you made it up, I'm so very sorry. But yes, so you have 4 things to put in your paper now. I am pleading with you to mark them. Please mark them, because I have a lot of papers to read, and then it's not that I'm angry with you that you didn't mark it. It's that I mentally think you didn't do it. I just think you didn't do it because maybe I can't find it. And if I have, some weeks I have 45 papers to read, if all my high schoolers and all you guys do, and it's fine. I asked for that. But it means that it takes me a long time to hunt through your paper to find them. Do you see what I mean? I just want to know that you did them. So you do not have to, if you type your papers, you do not have to type it into the text. You don't have to, oh, I forgot to type that in. Now I have to just print it out and then just write, S in the margin, and then I'll look for your simile there. Unfortunately, we have two A words now, so maybe alliteration, antithesis. Just put ing. Just write it out. Oh, we're not doing, oh yeah, we are doing it. What? I don't care. Do you know what? You could probably do A twice, and I would, if I can't tell the difference between antithesis and alliteration, that's, you know what? Then you're awesome. And then you can do this. Okay. All right. But please mark them in some fashion. It really, really helps me. And also it is good to learn to follow directions. I will be gracious to you when you don't follow directions, and I will say, well, I'll do better next time. But someday someone will not, the IRS is not gracious to you when you don't follow directions. They will put you in prison. I will not. So practice with me and then escape prison. Not a true lesson at all. Okay, let's look at our reading questions. On page 39. Oh, I need my glasses. Reading questions. See, I said follow directions. They said they don't do it. I'm obviously just too nice. I gotta toughen up. Okay. I brought my map of, here. I decided not to put it up on the board because I wasn't sure we'd need it. But I have my super duper close up of Rome, which was this in, okay, something like this in the book. And it shows you, they keep talking about, and they built a wall, the Republic wall, the precincts of Rome enclosed by a wall at the time of the Republic when they threw out the kings is here with the hills. And also now there's two bridges across the Tiber, but in Horatius's time there was just one. And this Janiculum, this hilly area where Lars Porsena and his peeps were camped, weren't besieging the city exactly, but waiting to figure out how to get in. So if they start talking about something very specific to Rome itself, I'll try to keep remembering this because it might help. Yes, Jesse. That's good. I went to a Memoria Press teaching conference, and Memoria Press makes these and sells them, and I bought them there because I thought that they would come in handy. And then I even had them laminated. Okay, because I tear things up. No, they were not laminated. Okay, last week, we ended our talk about Rome and its campaign basically to conquer its neighbors, right? Veii, and the Sabines, and the Aequians, and the Volscians. The Latins, they're gonna be fighting today. They're expanding. And as they expanded, they had a general named Camillus. Do you remember Camillus? We ended with him. I don't think I gave you Camillus's whole story. I have time for this. Yes, I do. Dorothy Mills kind of skims over it. She just says he was great. He was good at what he did militarily, but he got accused of misusing public funds, like embezzling. Okay, and I feel the need to vindicate Camillus. Here's what happened. Camillus helped take the town of Veii. Finally, they'd been fighting these people for like 10 years. This went on and on and on. So it was a big deal when they finally took it. And Camillus is a good guy, and he made the mistake of vowing to the gods a tenth of the spoils. Okay, which is fine. And everybody is fine with that. And he's going to build a temple, and he's going to put him in the temple, to say thank you to the gods. But when they finally took the city, they let the soldiers go in and plunder. And which was a thing sometimes, especially a long-term siege. The soldiers are tired. They want a reward. You say, great, have at it, boys. Go in there and just grab pretty things and take it home. And he let them do this. But then later he thought, oh, shoot, I dedicated a tenth of the spoils to the gods. So he said, well, I'm really sorry, but I need you to bring some of it back. can you bring basically the equivalent of a tenth of what you took? And already they're not happy. Like, I worked so hard to help take Vei, and he said I could have this. And now he's taking it away. No one likes to be given something and then have it taken away, right? And so he did this well-meaningly. And then it got worse because then he got thinking more. You need to stop thinking. He thought more and he said, technically, the value of the land should be included in the value of the gift. So he called them all together and said, could you bring back a little more? So they turned this into charges that he was pilfering the money, embezzling it, we would say today, that he was keeping some of it. And there's no evidence that he was. He was a pretty straight shooter, good guy. But it just ticked him off so much to be asked to bring it back. Does that make sense? No, he did. But, Rhett, I have a pile of gold at home, and being explained why I have to bring some of it back does not make me feel better about bringing it back. I'm sorry. I still don't want to do it. So this was Camillus. And so he left, and this was the end of our reading last week. He left Rome, and he said, he stretched out his hands to the Capitol and prayed to the gods that if, without any fault of his own, but merely through the malice and violence of the people, he was driven out into banishment, the Romans might quickly repent of it, and that all mankind might witness their need for the assistance and desire for the return of Camillus. And on the next page, our Greek biographer Plutarch tells us, there is not a Roman, but believes that immediately upon the prayers of Camillus, a sudden judgment followed, and that he received a revenge for the injustice done unto him. For almost immediately after his departure, such a punishment visited the city of Rome, and an era of such loss and danger and disgrace so quickly succeeded. That disaster was the invasion of the Gauls. And, okay, so can I just do this? Can you guys see it? Okay, so Gaul is what we call France today. But it was not inhabited by the ancestors of the French. It was inhabited by Celtic people related to the people in Britain. Yeah. This bothers me, Matthew. When did Celtic become Celtic? We're supposed to say Celtic, but it should, in English, it should be Celtic, and we say the Boston Celtics. What? But all the learned people is like, now we're all going to say Celts. I should just start a one-woman crusade. It's like, you know what? I'm just going to say Celtic. But it's like Celtic music. And no, it's when I was a little girl, it was all Celtic. I don't understand the world. Anyway, whoever these people were, Celts or Celts, they were related to the British. And a bunch of German barbarians came in later called Franks, and that's why they call it France. So these Gauls, now I'll go down here, live up here, right on that cliff, and they poured across, and you see this is even called Cisalpine Gaul. They divided Gaul into Gaul on the other side of the Alps, Transalpine Gaul, and a little bit of the Gauls that lived up here, Cisalpine Gaul. And they were up there. France is nice, but apparently they wanted to go somewhere nicer, and they specifically wanted to go somewhere nicer because someone living in northern Italy was going back and forth and having trading with them, having business dealings. And once he brought them some wine, they really liked it. Really liked wine. I said, where do we get more of this? Where do they make this? And I don't know that's the only reason they came, but it does seem to be a reason they came. Like, those people on the other side of those mountains, their life is awesome. Let's go there. So they went, and they just started taking over. And they weren't, Dorothy Mills describes them as not ever settling down. They just like to come and visit a place and take stuff and then leave. Sort of Viking-ish. Do you see what I mean? Let's just take and pillage and burn a little bit and put the fear of God or the gods into these people, and then we'll just leave. That's okay. We'll go find another group of people to do it too and take their stuff as well. And so they weren't coming to take over Italy so much as to just take stuff and go back home eventually. But nobody wants them, even if they're just going to be there for a little while. And they're spreading, they're heading towards Rome. Yes, Jesse? Oh, yeah. Shoot. What was I thinking? So they were in the neighborhood of Rome, a nearby town, and the town happened to be an ally of Rome. And the Gauls were there, and basically the Gauls just said, give us your stuff. We're going to take this land, even though I don't think they would have stayed on. We're going to take this land and some of your stuff. And the city sent an ambassador to Rome and said, come help us. We're allies. So the Romans sent a couple of ambassadors. And the conversation went something like this. What are you doing here, Gauls? We're here to take stuff. Is that a problem? Yes, that's a problem. What makes you think you can just take this land? Well, Romans, we think these people aren't farming enough of their land. If they just leave land empty, they're just asking for somebody to come and take it. And the Romans say, well, but do you think that's fair? Can you just take stuff? Can you just walk in and take other people's stuff? And they're like, what are you going to do about it? This was not a word-for-word quotation, but this is roughly how the conversation went. And then they were the Gauls were very abusive to the ambassadors, verbally abusive, okay? You know what I mean? Insulted them. And it just really made those ambassadors just hot. And they broke out and killed some of them. See, this is a problem because it's sort of known that ambassadors don't get killed or kill other people, right? If you welcome ambassadors or heralds from the enemy, we just have an understanding. We will send you back safe. We will hear what you have to say, and you aren't here to kill us, and we won't kill you. And they lost it, and they started a battle, and they killed some of them. And so the Gauls feel justified. Those dirty, rotten Romans, they don't even understand the niceties of ambassadorship and heralds. Let's go get them. The Romans killed the Gauls. The Roman ambassadors killed some of the Gauls because the Gauls were so insulting. No. No. And they got in big trouble when they got home. Those ambassadors, the Senate said, I don't know what you were thinking. You have made us a target. They're going to attack. But you've also made us hated by our neighbors because this is just not the way civilized countries act. Anyway, the Gauls showed up, and everybody says, okay, we need to go up on the Capitoline Hill. It's got pretty steep sides, and it's where the Capitol building is, and sort of a fortress area. Let's hole up there, and we can hold out. We've got some food, we've got some water up there. But here's the problem. We can't take everybody up there. We don't have room for everybody. We don't have food and water for everybody. So we can only take people that can actually help defend the city. So you, women and children, you need to load everything you can on carts and get out of town. Do you have friends or relatives in the country? Go stay with them. They do. But the oldest men, the men who had been senators, the men who had been consuls previously, said, okay, you know what? We would not dream of eating the food on the Capitol when we can't help defend it. We're too old. And you know what? We're too old to run. We're too old to pack our stuff on carts. You know, we're just going to stay here in the city and deal with it. We'll take what comes. So they put on their best togas. They put seats out in front of their houses, and they just sit there and they wait for the enemy. The doors are open. The gates are open because there's no point. The Gauls are just going to break them down anyway. There's not enough people to defend the city anyway, so it doesn't matter. And the Gauls think, is this a trick? Is this a trap? And they come into the city and they start looking around. Yes, Jesse?
I remember this story where that it said in the book where this barbarian, he was
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Very good. That's exactly what happened. These old men are sitting there, and at first the Gauls are a little freaked out. Why are those guys sitting there? What are they doing? Are they real? It's like, are they? So yeah, one guy goes up, and they have these, and he just goes and he touches his beard, and the old man just whacks him. He's gonna say, just whacks him. Touch me, you dirty, rotten barbarian, and the Gaul just kills him. And it's the signal, just kill them all. Kill them all. And so they go through the city and they kill all these old consuls and senators. And kill old men. And kill the elderly. But then they worked their way to the capital, and they realized the bulk of the people were up there. And as we've discussed, it's very hard to fight people uphill. You know, they throw things on you. If they're smart, they throw things on you. And it's very hard to dodge the things they're throwing while throwing things yourself up a hill. And so it's always better. See, this is Mrs. Ferguson's military tactics, lesson 31. It is always better just to camp around them and let them starve. Don't ever do this to anybody. But that's what they decided to do. Just eventually they'll have to give up because they'll run out, which is true. I don't know if there's a water source up there, but they were certainly running out of food eventually. But meanwhile, Camillus is living nearby. Camillus, who had been unjustly thrown out of Rome. And he hears the Gauls are rampaging, and he says to his guests, you know, I don't like to brag, but I am one of the best generals Rome has ever had, and I'm here. And if you give me guys, we can take these guys out because you know if they take Rome, they're coming for you next. They're not just going to take Rome and leave the area. You're a target. Let's go do something about it. So they do. And they said, we just want to name you in charge of all the Roman armies. Camillus says, well, love to, but can't do that without Senate's permission. The Senate has to commission me and put me in charge. And a guy says, I got it. I'll take care of it. So he sneaks into Rome at night, and he climbs up the backside where it's really, really steep. He climbs up the rock face up to the Capitol. And he crawls over the wall, and he goes to the Senate that's up there, and he says, can Camillus take over? Like, yes, please tell Camillus to take over. Do something. So he climbs back down, he sneaks out, and he goes back to Camillus. Great. Well, next day, some of the Gauls, it's boring to besiege. Not that I've done it, but I assume that it's just a little boring. And so they're kicking around, they're walking around, they walk around the back. It's like, does that look like footprints to you? I feel like that looks like footprints. Does that look like rocks to you? Do you think rocks have fallen down? I think somebody's climbing in and out. Shoot, if they can do it, we can do it. So they went and told the commanding officer, he's like, yeah, okay, small band of you, like 30 of them. We're gonna, tonight, we're climbing up the rock face. And we're gonna take them. Great. So they're climbing, they're so quiet. And the guards have fallen asleep, which is a big no-no. And said guard who fell asleep is going to be flung off the Tarpeian rock. Treason. But now we're at my first question. Why did they not take them by surprise? Do it, Jesse. The famous geese. Juno's geese. They had geese that were sacred to Juno. And they were hungry too, you know, because if I'm running out of food, I'm not feeding the geese. I may be eating the geese. But we can't eat these geese because Juno, you know, we don't mess with Juno. So we can't eat her geese. But I sure don't have anything. So they're, you know, if you've ever been hungry at night, you know, they're kind of hanging out at night. They're not really sleeping because they're hungry. And they hear a noise and they see the shadows and they just start honking their brains out. They just make such a clamor. And everybody wakes up and pushes them down at the wall and flings them down. And the Capitol is saved. All because of Juno's geese. Geese saved Rome. Geese saved Rome. I couldn't even make that up if I wanted to make up a funny story. So, so I mean, but unfortunately, it's not the end of the story. I mean, that's a nice ending, but the guys are still holed up in the capital, and they're still starving. So eventually, they say, "We give up. We don't know what Camillus is doing. For all we know, Camillus is dead. You know, he's been battling out there. We're waiting for rescue." And it says, this is the Roman historian Livy. An agreement was reached by which 1,000 pounds of gold was fixed as the ransom of a people destined ere long to rule the world. The humiliation was great enough as it was, but it was aggravated by the meanness of the Gauls, who used unjust weights on the scale. The scales were fixed, so they didn't weigh true. And so the Romans would end up giving them more gold than they'd even bargained for, because the scales don't measure right. And when the Romans protested, Brennus, the insolent leader of the Gauls, threw his sword into the scale, into the other tray, and with an exclamation intolerable to Roman ears, "Vae victis," woe to the conquered. In other words, when you've been conquered, you'll take whatever you get. We can do anything we want to you. We can weigh your gold any way we want. What are you going to do about it? You're the loser. Woe to the conquered. But help was near. While this was going on, Camillus arrived at the gates of Rome. He took the gold out of the scales and delivered it to his officers. He commanded the Gauls to take their weights and scales and depart, saying it was customary with the Romans to deliver their country with iron, not with gold. What does he mean? With a sword, you bet. We don't buy our way out. We fight our way out. You can just leave. And of course, Camillus has quite the army to back him up. And the Gauls have the added problem that Italy and the environment of Rome in particular used to be very swampy. You know, we've read about them draining lakes and they're improving the land. Lots of swampy areas, and you know, mosquitoes like swampy areas. And mosquitoes sometimes carry malaria. And they bite you and then they make you very, very ill. People even today die of malaria. Not in this country, because it's easily treated. But I know a family that adopted a little boy from Africa, and he's probably 15 or 16 now. His dad died of malaria. That's why he ended up being adopted and coming to America. Just 15 or 16 years ago, his dad died of malaria in places where they don't have the medications, right? Makes you really, really sick. If you do recover, you get really, really sick. If you've read the Little House books, when they were the house on Plum Creek, was that? Anyway, you know, they got really, really sick, and you know, a neighbor said, "Go check on the Ingalls," and they probably had malaria from that stream where they kept going down to. Anyway, for these reasons, illness, Camillus, the Gauls pulled out, and I need you to turn timelines. It's timeline time. I want you to go to the one that's on page 72. It should be 500 BC to 1 BC. I'm just very, very sloppy today. I'm so sorry. And 387. The Gauls sack Rome. No, but someone else does, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. I'm going to tell you how long it is till they do it. No, just if you write this on your timelines, you're good. I'm going to say more and write more, but you don't have to write it down. You know, I feel very rambly today. Has anybody, I mean, sack. Like, you sack a city, right? You sack the quarterback. This is all I know about football. And if you get fired from your job, they say you've been sacked. Have you heard that use of it? Like, I got sacked. Okay, you will have to trust me. Maybe it's not in vogue anymore, but in all my lifetime earlier, like that was a phrase. If you said I got sacked at work today, it meant they fired you. Anyway, I was reading with the high schoolers. I was reading Livy that keeps being quoted in Mills, and apparently, see, I want this to be so. I heard that this phrase, getting the sack, because I've read it in even medieval stuff. It's like, and someone deserves the sack, deserves to be sacked. Like what? So we're reading in Livy, and there was a story of a guy who they thought he killed his parents, or they gave him the punishment for killing his parents. He did something bad. They put you in a sack with a dog, a snake, a rooster, and something else. I don't know. And they tie you up into this sack with them, and they throw you in the river. Did we talk about? Did you hear about this? Did we talk about this? And I think that's why they talk about sacking. I don't know. Talking about sacking things for no good reason at all, because you got the sack. You got sacked literally, and I don't think, if they sew me up in a bag with those animals, they don't have to throw me in the water. Like, it's almost a mercy to throw you in the water after that. I don't want to spend too much time in that sack. Well, I feel like they'd be already panicked after you sewed them into the sack together. Okay, anyway. Rome is not going to be sacked again until 410 AD. No, I told you. Yes. So this is BC. So we have to add these together to get, because this is years before, this is years after. 797. Almost 800 years are going to pass before Rome gets sacked again by anyone. That's amazing. That's a really long time for a city to just be fighting and fighting all these and never lose, and never, the city itself is never taken. 800 years almost. Anyway, it's going to be another G people, not Gauls, but Goths. Goths are going to take it in 410. The Goths. Yeah, we'll talk about them in the spring. We'll get yes. We'll get up to the Goths in the spring. Okay, so that is the story of the Gauls and Rome and Camillus. But they are not done fighting. Now, next up on the fighting schedule is the Latins. They are just here to the south. And do you hear King Latinus's name in that? King Latinus that Aeneas has encountered, right? And he's fighting the Latins. The Latins were basically allies, longstanding allies of Rome, back to King Latinus' days. And the Latins didn't understand why they were second-class citizens. We get certain privileges. Rome is giving us certain privileges. That's great. But we can't be senators. We can't be consuls. There's certain places of honor that we're not allowed. And we want our rights. We want one consul to be Latin every year. One Roman consul, one Latin consul. We want full and equal rights to be in the Senate. And it's a reasonable request, right? But Jesse, did you have a comment?
Yeah,
They were declined, roughly. Titus Manlius, the consul, said the Senate was visited with madness if they accepted this. So they're going to fight it out. And they get a prophecy that, unfortunately, the victory would go to the country that had a general that died in battle. If I'm one of the generals, this is not good news. Titus Manlius takes charge of half the army, and he makes a rule. I do want to zip this up. You cannot engage single combat with the enemy. I don't want any of you soldiers just going off half-cocked and starting trouble before we're ready to have full-scale battle. Control yourselves. Well, unfortunately, his son, young Titus Manlius Jr., goes out and he's wandering around and he's kind of near the guards of the enemy, the Latin guards, and they start verbally abusing him. Okay, you Romans, you sit around in your camp, don't do much, do you? I don't know why you got a reputation for fighting. I think you're in there watching Hallmark movies and eating chips. That's what I think. That's all you're good for. Something of that nature. And Titus Manlius gets infuriated, and he just lights into him. And there's a skirmish, and Titus Manlius wins. I know. And he brings back, and he thinks his dad's going to be so proud. This is the sad part. Oh, dad's going to love me. So he brought all the spoils he took from him, and he dumped them in his dad's feet and said, boom, aren't you proud of me? Well, no, because I told everyone there was going to be no single combat. And it's bad enough when you disobey your dad, but when you disobey your commanding officer in the military and you disobey a command of the consul out in the field, I have a problem. And so this is the next question I asked you. What difficult decision did Titus Manlius, the consul, have to make? What are his choices?
Kill his son.
Either.
Oh, yeah, got
Okay, either I let my son go,
it.
and now consuls don't look like they have to be obeyed. I've set a precedent. You can disobey the general, you can disobey the consul and get away with it. Or I have to execute my son. Just like Brutus, whose sons were conspirators to bring the kings back in.
Was they just like, okay, if you disobey, you die, or is it like, because I feel like he kind of, in some sort of way, like he disobeyed, but he also, it's not like he could have like cheated.
Well, but it is in their eyes. That's a very good way, because if you flout the existing authority, you're acting against the powers that be. You're acting against the governing authorities. Yeah, he says either the consul's authority must be vindicated by your death, or forever abrogated by letting you go unpunished. Go, lictor, bind him to the stake. Executed his son.
Oh, I remember this.
Executed his son.
Yeah, he was like, he just like stood there, and they like kept moving it.
Yeah.
And then it's like,
Mm-hmm. No, he's not going to stop it. You know, there's a very similar story in the Old Testament. A foolish, well, okay. I don't know that Titus Manlius's rule was foolish. It's probably a good idea if little bands of your soldiers don't go out and engage with the enemy and start a full-scale battle before the rest of your army is armed and ready, okay? But do you remember that when Saul was king of Israel, they were fighting probably Philistines, because that's who they were always fighting. And he made a rule that no one should eat anything until they avenge themselves on their enemies. Do you remember?
and then his son Jonathan ate after he
Son Jonathan ate some honey, found a honeycomb. Jonathan did not know about this rule. And when he was told about it, he said, well, it's a stupid rule. It's a stupid rule, Dad, because we are expending a lot of energy in this fight, and the men could use, I mean, he didn't say it this way, the calories, the refreshment, to get the energy to go on fighting. They need the food to fuel them. This is a stupid thing for my dad to say. Saul was ready to kill Jonathan for the same reason that Titus Manlius, he disobeyed. You disobeyed my orders. But in Jonathan's case, people pled on his behalf because he did a great job that day. You know, Jonathan was victorious that day, but he disobeyed. Say Jesse again.
Yeah, that's kind of because he was very important.
Yeah,
Very important.
yeah. But the Romans were very, very strict about obedience. I think you've gotten that impression already. Doing your duty. This is the way it has to be, was their attitude. Yes, Rome first. Him was second. There's a famous line. We're going to read the play Julius Caesar next month, and a second Brutus that we're going to meet. If you don't, he does something. I'm not even going to ruin the story if you don't even know what he does. Anyway, he says he did not that I loved his victim less, but that I loved Rome more. Not that I loved him less, but the motto of all these people. Not that I love my son less, but that I love Rome more. We might find that a little twisted, like the priority list is askew. But that was their priority list. Yes, less and more. And it's sort of, oh, you guys aren't doing Latotes. That's the high schoolers, never mind. Fortunately, Titus Manlius didn't have to be the general who lost his life to get victory. It was the other general. And so it says Latins were given, were Roman citizens, but their privileges were limited. They could enjoy the rights of citizenship, voting, holding office in their own cities, not in Rome. No, Rome won the battle. Yeah, that's what I say. I'm sorry. I was not clear. Thank you. Titus Manlius wasn't the general. It was the other consul. It was the other Roman consul. I'm sorry. Yes, I see the missing link in what I said. Okay, thank you. No, the Romans won. Next up on the hit list of people to fight are the Samnites. Over here, Samnium. You see how we're spreading? We're spreading the Latin. We're spreading south, Latium. Now we're spreading over here. It's not just confined. We're not just fighting Clusium or Tarquinii or Veii anymore. We're starting to spread. And one by one, everybody's falling before them. But before the Samnite War, one day, just a big hole opened up in the forum. I have nothing to say about that. I don't know. Earthquake, it doesn't say it was. And a sinkhole. And I'll tell you the story. You don't have to believe the story. I find the story suspect, but I can't prove it didn't happen. A hole opened, and they asked the seers, what's the deal with the hole? And they said, well, the gods want us to throw in to sacrifice the thing that makes Rome strong, the power of Rome, the strength of Rome. And a guy named Marcus Curtius said, well, I'll tell you right out what the strength of Rome is. It's her young fighting men. So he dolled up his horse. He put fancy armor on his horse, put fancy armor on himself, and grabbed his sword, and he just rode his horse right into the hole. Just rode into the hole. And then the hole closed up.
What?
I told you, I'm telling you the story. I'm delivering a story. You don't have to believe it. That is the story. Okay. It does say they threw in some fruit and flowers after him. I'm not sure why. Funeral? I don't know. Okay, so they're fighting the Samnites now, in Samium, and the Samnites actually get them pinned up. They get them pinned up in a valley with no escape, and the Samnite general captures this army, and this general's dad gives him some advice. He says, either let the Romans go free or put every man of them to death. He believed that by letting the Romans depart uninjured, the Samnites would establish a lasting peace and friendship with a very powerful people. You know, mercy, they'll love you. You could have done something mean to them and you didn't. If, on the other hand, the Romans were put to death, they would at least postpone further war for some time, as it would take Rome a long time to recover from the loss of her armies. Not to mention, those dead guys will never fight you again. Two options. Be nice to them and let them go, and they will be your friends. or damage them past repair, kill them all. Of course, he does not choose either path. He decides for option 3. They were made to agree to a humiliating peace, and the whole army was condemned to pass under the yoke. I think this term has been used already. Maybe you're familiar with it. It doesn't sound so bad, so you have to use your imagination. You put a couple of spears in the ground, and then you put one across, and you make a little fake doorway to nowhere, right? It's a little doorway. And then the enemy has to take off all their armor and lay down all their weapons, and completely unarmed and defenseless, they have to pass through the little doorway. But it's low enough that they kind of have to bend, humiliatingly, while the enemy is lined up on either side, and they are yelling not very nice things at you, about you and your mother and your whole family and your city and your dog. Everybody, they're insulting. And perhaps, this is my embellishment, don't know for sure, pelting you a little bit with any vegetables that might be available, I feel like would be a good thing, okay? That's passing under the yoke. It's not physically harmful. Do you know what I mean? Then they let you go. But it's just, if you are a proud young Roman, oh man, you are so humiliated. You are so humiliated. So they're not just gonna go home and put up with that. The Samnite general's dad was right. If you humiliate them, you will pay the price later. So, of course, they go home. The Senate says, yeah, we're not agreeing to that peace, that you were forced to do that. And they just came back and conquered them with more energy than they would have had otherwise if they hadn't been so humiliated. That's Mrs. Ferguson's tactics. Point 54. When you capture them, kill them all or be nice. Don't humiliate them. I don't feel like I'm teaching the right things in this class somehow. Okay, so as we've seen, Rome is spreading, the Samnium, Latium, and they're headed this direction. Now, if you can see it, what group of people are living in this direction? Greeks. Greek colonies. Remember, the last semester we talked about through space considerations or people just being ambitious, they started about 800 BC, they started sending out colonies, and many of these colonies went to southern Italy. And these Greeks are still there, and the Romans are headed their way. And so when you are a colony, you are devoted to the mother city. Well, I mean, unless the mother city is really abusive to you. For example, the American colonies. We were British. We were British for, 160, 150 years. And we thought of ourselves as British, and we expected the British to help us if we needed help, right? If somebody attacks us, we expect the British to come. We expect certain rights, and they have certain duties to us. And the Greek colonies were the same. Even though it had been hundreds of years since they had been formed, they still remembered the Greek city who sent them out, and they expected help. So when they see the Romans coming, where do they turn for help? They call to Greece and say, please come help us. Yes, right.
This is kind of but was that Troy City, the fake Troy City, like the Troy, was that
Buthrotum or Buthrutum. I have no idea, Rhett. It's got a name, but I don't think there was ever a place where you could go and there was an actual little baby Troy. But there might be a city later with the same name, and they say, once here, Andromache lived with Helenus, but things have changed since then, and it doesn't look like Troy anymore. That's a really good question. I don't know. But I feel like it's Buthrutum or Buthrotum, it's something like that. And I feel like I've seen that on maps. But it might be a coincidence that they have the same name. So I'm sorry, I have no good answer for you. So they called Greece, and it just so happened that Greece at that time had a king named Pyrrhus. And Pyrrhus had some high goals for himself. He aspired to be the world's next Alexander the Great. Sort of. You know, I feel like I have it in me. I just need the opportunity. I know I could be great. And he had had some battles in Greece, but he was sort of on the lookout for an opportunity. And then he gets the message from Italy, come over here. And his aspirations just expand. You know what? I'm going to take Italy, then I'm going to go take Carthage, take North Africa, I'll take out Sicily. I'm just going to go on the rampage. It's going to be awesome. So he goes to Italy with 20 elephants. And the Romans had never seen elephants before. This is the first time they encountered elephants. And now I need you to use your imagination. Is there anybody here who's never been to a zoo and actually physically seen an elephant up close and personal? We all, I mean, because Nairobi Zoo used to, the elephant died. Okay, they have no elephants. Okay, so you've seen an elephant. So imagine that elephant is not in an enclosure, but he's out just walking around. And you've never seen one before. You've never seen a picture of one before. You had no idea such a creature existed. And it's just, he's huge. He's got the trunk thing going on. That's weird. He looks really heavy. If he steps on you, that's not going to be good. Not to mention that it is my understanding that elephants, when they get riled, can charge very rapidly and can be quite aggressive. Yes. Really? So they want to just pet it and take it home, or? I don't want an elephant to take me home. It's scary. Yes. But you know, if you stick one with your spear, I don't think he's going to be playing in the mud. Well, because he's the enemy. he's like the equivalent of the enemy's tank. Anyway, all I'm asking is for you to imagine the shock of the Roman army. Like, what are those? Those are enormous. Yes, and maybe I want one. And they called them gray oxen. But it's a hippopotamus in the song, right? I want a hippopotamus for Christmas, not an elephant. Okay. All right. Okay, we are straying far from the topic. Let's go back to Rome and its elephants. And Pyrrhus, with his grandiose ideas of what's going to happen. Now, something happened. There was fight, and he won. But tell me the answer to the next question. What is a Pyrrhic victory?
Victory is when someone ends up winning the battle and they conquer the other person, but it leaves them ruined.
Yeah.
They have nothing else to compare with.
The victory cost you so much, you might as well have lost. This is what happened to Pyrrhus. He fought them the first time, and it was pretty rough on both sides. And Pyrrhus actually asked for peace. And the Senate sent a message back to him saying, yeah, you take your gray oxen and your guys, and you just leave. And then you send a messenger, because we don't deal with people who are occupying our soil. So the battle's on, and they did it again. And someone came to Pyrrhus afterwards and congratulated him on his victory. And he is reported to have said, another such victory, and I shall be ruined. I am sorry to report that that is what Pyrrhus is known for. He did not become the next Alexander the Great and conquer Sicily or Carthage or anything else that we ever talk about. Always when we talk about Pyrrhus, we talk about the fact that he technically won, but he might as well have lost because it was so disastrous. So he packed up and went home. I'm feeling a little sad for him right now. That for 2,000 years, over 2,000 years, every time the man gets mentioned, we talk about what a crummy job he did. The guy who lost practically all his army, that's the guy. That's how he went down in history. That's a little sad. So now the Greek colonies are unprotected as well. And Italy is starting to realize that one by one, city by city, Rome's going to come for all of us. That's not going to stop them from trying to fight back. And the last question I asked you was, why do you think Rome was always at war with someone? This is just an opinion. Yes, Matthew. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna explore that. Don't forget what you're gonna say. We are not. I'm gonna say this delicately. Do you think that certain groups of people just have certain personality types or things that mark them? Now we're kind of afraid to say things like that because we're afraid of offending, and they say, well, that's stereotyping or whatever. But sometimes it's true. Sometimes there are groups of people that just seem to have a behavior, and maybe they learned it. Is it heredity or environment? We don't know. Maybe it's both. But I'm thinking of something that I don't think this offends. This is probably offensive now too. But the Irish drink a lot. I mean, that's proverbial. And it's like, okay, why do the Irish? Well, the Irish have had terrible, terrible history. They've been horribly abused. Maybe that's why they drink. Or maybe there are just certain people groups more disposed to certain sins or certain activities. And, are the Romans aggressive because they grew up in an environment where that was valued? Or are they aggressive just because it's in their blood, as we would say? We have no way of knowing. But I kind of wonder sometimes if there aren't, maybe we get traits from our ancestors that aren't physical traits. Does that make sense to you guys? But I mean, it's certainly reasonable that that was their nature, wherever that nature came from. Okay, well, just a second, Jesse. Rhett had something.
I thought because when people attack them, because they're very young, and it kind of just drew a lot of attention to themselves. Is why they were fighting a lot.
You mean, so how, connect the dots for me. So
people attacked them.
Oh, yes.
And that was one of the reasons they fought.
Okay.
They had a lot of money.
Oh, I see. So the drawing attention means they are conspicuous, and so others are worried about them, others want to fight them, and then they have to fight to defend themselves. Definitely. The Latins were demanding, maybe just demands, but they came for them. And the Gauls attacked. Jesse, what was yours?
Okay. Well, first of all, I feel like there's a lot of pressure when it comes to living in that time, because a lot of it was warfare and conquering, and Greece was looking very successful. So I feel like they saw them as kind of like a rival that they had to conquer. Roman pride and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I feel like it's kind of like gambling. It's like learning to win. You don't stop.
That could be. That could be. We also have it appears that it is part of human nature to more than we have. It's very, very hard to fight against wanting. Yes, we have. And so, we just had Christmas, but, and then we're already shopping for something on Amazon. It's like, what? Did I not get enough stuff for Christmas? But now I want to spend my Christmas money. I want more stuff, And so, they look at the neighboring lands, the neighboring people, and as the city of Rome is getting bigger, they need more resources to feed the inhabitants, so we need to cultivate more land. And then just the rush of ruling other people. Probably all of the above and some things we're not exploring explains. But their motivations, we don't know. But the fact that they did it, we do know. And within, not much more than 100, 150 years anyway, after the sack of Rome, Rome is going to rule basically all of Italy. Every community in Italy, pretty much, is going to be under Roman control. And you all know the story. It's not going to only be Italy. Eventually, it's going to be the entire circle of the Mediterranean. It's quite the success story. Okay, next week, I want you to read chapters 7 and 8. The section we just read these past 2 weeks was how Rome ruled Italy. The next section is called how Rome ruled herself. So it's a little more about the Roman government, the Republican government that they set up. And then the next chapter after that is about Roman religion. So we're going to read the two chapters for next week. You're going to write your paper. And last of all, let's take a look at the Aeneid. You're going to finish the Aeneid this week. So next week we meet, but the week after that is the first break, right? I believe, please. Well, I didn't run on my calendar wrong. Yes. And so we'll be starting a new book over break. I'm not going to ask you to read more than you normally would just for 1 week. Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes I double up on people. I'm not going to do that, but we'll be starting a new week. So, and it's the book For the Temple by G.A. Henty. It's another of our friend G.A. Henty. But we're meeting next week. I just want to, if for some reason you just make sure your family, For the Temple, if you have all the books at home that we're reading, great. But I have some families that get their books little by little, and then suddenly it creeps up on them. But we'll be starting a new book over break. Anyway, let's talk about the Aeneid. I have a picture, I have a painting even to pass around about what we read. When we left off last week, they were stopped in Sicily, and Juno sent Iris down to stir up the women to set fire to the ships. They didn't burn them all, fortunately. Just enough that it was going to be inconvenient. And yes, and you know what? We just don't need the frustration. We don't need these naysayers in our group. So Aeneas decided, all of you who just want to stay in Sicily, just stay. The king will give you land. He's a nice guy. You'll have a good life here. If you're sick and tired of traveling, and you're sick and tired of fighting, and you're not interested in being in on the ground floor of the whole Rome operation, you stay here. I only want people with me who are 100% on board, which isn't a bad thing. So they headed to Italy. They landed, and he went to the underworld and visited with his dad. And then in this week's reading, they finally are camped near the Tiber. And before I read what happened, I need to go back to the episode with the harpies. Do you remember the harpies? The bird-bodied, woman-headed, disgusting creatures that apparently take your food, and then it always says they foul the rest of it. I think they poo on it, because birds do that. And so this is my picture of fouling the food. Although, if a bird even came and stood on my food and pecked at it a little bit, I also would not eat it, probably. But whatever they do, whatever they did, Aeneas and his men didn't like it, and so they shot some of them. And the queen of the harpies came and said, "You will come at last to the land of Italy. That's settled. But know that before you build the walls of your new city, you will be so hungry that you will be driven to eat the very tables on which you set your meat." Right? This is not good at all. I have never been so hungry that I was tempted to eat a table. I don't know about you. I don't know how hungry I'd have to be for that to happen. But they landed finally. We are in Italy. We're right next to the Tiber. And it says, they sat down under one of the trees to have their dinner. They made plates of dough, and on these they put such fruits as they could find. It was but a scanty meal, and when they had eaten all the fruits, they were still hungry. Then they began to break up their platters of dough and to eat them. And the boy Ascanius said, laughing, "What? Do we even eat our tables?" When Aeneas heard these words, he was very glad. And he caught the boy in his arms and kissed him, saying, "Now this is a good word you have said, my son. Long ago, that dreadful creature, the harpy, said that someday we should be so pressed by hunger that we should eat our tables. My father also prophesied that when we did this, we might know that we had indeed come to the land where we were to have our home. And now this has come to pass. This is our home. And as for the hunger which I feared, lo, we have endured it and are yet alive. Turns out the threatened starvation wasn't as bad as they thought. They've eaten their tables. And word goes to the neighboring king of the Latins, King Latinus, that some strange people are camped on the shore. They've pulled their ships up, they're having lunch, don't know what they want, and they send messengers to find out. Now, oh, go ahead. No, which is why they need to talk to King Latinus. They need permission. They need alliance. So, I don't think King. Yes, but it is unclear whether King Latinus owns this land or whether it's just nearby. But yes, it's just empty. It's just an empty space. I don't know. You ask very good questions, and I just don't know. I don't know the answer. But I do know that they feel the need to explain themselves to Latinus and ask him for permission to settle there, which sounds a bit like he has some control over it. Okay. He has been getting signs from the gods. He, I was in the garden one day, and a bunch of bees flew in, and they just all hung together. They just stuck together, and they were just dangling from the tree. And the ever popular prophet, who always seems to be on hand when you need one, says that means that a group of strangers is going to come here and find a new home. And then one day his daughter Lavinia was sacrificing at the altar, and it was almost like the flames of the altar jumped up to her head. Her head was on fire. This is the third head on fire, right? We've had Ascanius' head was on fire. Servius Tullius' head was on fire. Lavinia's head is on fire. And so this isn't her, this is Mrs. Ferguson's, I don't know, magical observations. If someone's head catches on fire, first of all, you should probably try to put it out. But second of all, if it doesn't go out by natural means, it probably means something you need to go find a prophet. It's just so weird. Why is that a thing in these Roman stories? And so the ever popular local prophet says, Lavinia is destined to marry a foreigner, but this is going to bring trouble to the city. So Latinus already knows, there's going to be somebody show up and my daughter's supposed to marry him. Unfortunately, there is a heroic young man in the neighborhood named Turnus. Turnus is Mr. Awesome, all right? He just wins every battle. He's good looking, he's tough, and he's a little full of himself, And it just seems natural to everyone that Lavinia, Latinus' daughter, should marry Turnus. That seems to make sense. They haven't really formally set it up yet, but everyone suspects and expects that this is what's going to happen. But Latinus knows, deep down, he can't do that because the gods want her to marry a foreigner, but I don't know who it is. Yes, Matthew. Were you awesome? Yeah. Did you die at the end? Okay. Oh, I wish we shouldn't say that. I think you already know who's going to win here. If you're not sure who's going to win this battle, I feel like you haven't been paying attention. Gaston. Yes, I do picture Gaston. Gaston is Turnus. And he would sing a song. In the musical version of the Aeneid, he would definitely sing a song like that. Juno, let's go back to our actual book. Juno sees what's going on, and she says, and I always feel like Juno sounds a little bit like a toddler. See if you've ever heard a small child. Hopefully, as we've gotten older, we don't say this sort of thing anymore. basically, she starts out by saying, they're here in Italy and there's nothing I can do about that. Nevertheless, there is still something which I can do. I cannot keep this fellow from the kingdom of Latium, but I will see to it that he shall buy this kingdom at a great price. All right, this is going to happen anyway, but I'm going to make everybody as miserable about it as I possibly can. Perhaps you have actually done this to other people in your life. I don't want to go on this family trip, and I'm going to make my family sorry they brought me. I'm going to make sure I am sullen and morose and complaining the whole day. Okay, let's just all admit it. Okay, I'm admitting it freely. I've done it. She says, the gods in heaven will not help me, therefore I will go to the powers of hell. So we got to remember when we read that this is Hades. Okay, so it's not like I'm going to invoke Satan, but it's close because some of the inhabitants of the underworld are you just don't mess with. And one of those groups is the Furies. The Furies are wicked mean, ugly, snaky hair, and they will drive you insane if you kill your parents. We met this with Orestes. Do you remember? If you recall, he killed his mom, Clytemnestra, because Clytemnestra killed his dad, Agamemnon, after the Trojan War. And the Furies came after him to drive him insane. And she goes to Alecto, the chief of the Furies, and says, I need some help. And Alecto has a three-pronged attack. It's pretty nasty. She first of all goes to Latinus's wife, Amata, Lavinia's mom. Amata is the president of the Turnus fan club. She has a t-shirt and all the merchandise. And she wants Turnus to be her son-in-law. Really a lot. Already, before Alecto shows up. But Alecto does this creepy thing. Do you remember this? So she plucks. Okay, so it's like it's spiritually happening. Okay, so all the things I'm going to describe isn't like you can't watch it happen, but it's sort of like dreamlike or hallucinating, but it is actually happening. Okay, it's weird. Plucks off one of the snakes and pitches it at Amata, and it crawls down and it goes into her heart and gets into her bloodstream and drives her wacko. It's horrifying. It really creeps me out. That this idea of a snake going through, but it's not really happening, but it is really happening. Anyway, so she gets up out of bed and she goes straight to her husband and says, and just loses it, has a complete emotional meltdown. What are you doing? Well, you don't know where this man has been, this Aeneas. You know what those Trojans do. They just go around the world and they steal women. Paris stole a woman. This Aeneas, he'll just steal Lavinia. He'll take her off. They won't stay here. I don't know what you're thinking, but this is a bad decision. And basically gives him a harangue and probably a headache. Stop number 2 for Alecto is Turnus. And she shows up and she's doing a disguise. But it says it's sort of like in a dream. Turnus is having a dream, but it's really happening. And he sees his old servant woman, and his servant woman says, are you just going to let Lavinia go to this stranger? If I were you, Turnus, I would go do something about it. And he says something to the effect of, oh, shut up, old woman, and let men deal with the war. This is the wrong thing to say to a Fury, because then she turns into her real self, with the snakes. And says, old woman, huh? I'll tell you what, you are going to start a war, and I'll make sure. And so she has a torch, and in his dream, it's like she hurls the torch right at his chest, and it plants itself in his chest, and then he wakes up. And he's not on fire. He's on fire for war. And then the third visit is the saddest one of all. Out in the woods nearby is a happy little family of agricultural workers whose daughter, Sylvia, has a pet deer that she raised from fawnhood, and it eats out of her hand, and she pets it, and it lives in the house sometimes. But then it's like a cat that goes out and in, or an indoor outdoor dog, and they let it out. Sometimes it's running around, and Ascanius decides to take his peeps and go out hunting. And Alecto stirs him up to shoot the pet deer. And she goes home, she finds out. And and it's dead, and it's in her lap, and it's so sad. Oh, my little deer, And her father and her brothers are enraged, and they just march out like, you dirty, rotten Trojans. You kill pets. How low is it to run around killing pets? It's a wild animal. We didn't know. And a battle breaks out, and people die. Now, here's the painting I brought. I'm going to pass it around because it's so incredibly hard to see. This is from 1681. And so in the 1600s and 1700s, there's a rash of artwork based on the Iliad and the Aeneid because it's late Renaissance times, right? This is the time when suddenly we're very, very interested in Greek and Roman culture again. And the Aeneid is front and center Roman culture. And so they paint all these paintings of scenes. And so you'll see this better when I pass it around. So it's called landscape, because it's mostly a landscape, with Ascanius shooting the stag of Sylvia. Down here we have a group of guys, and we have Ascanius, and he's got his bow pulled back. And over here's a deer. Maybe. If I have probably. It has a very tall head area that looks like it could be antlers. But I want to note a couple of things as you look at it. Notice that the sky is blue over here, but storm clouds are gathering. There's dark clouds over on this side because there is a storm gathering. There is a metaphorical storm gathering. When he does this, war breaks out. It's the gathering storm clouds are heading in at this moment. Also, weirdly, there is what look like Roman ruins or a Roman statue. I'm going to start passing this around so you can see it up close. And which is do you know the word anachronistic? It means it's in the wrong time period because there's no Rome yet. It hasn't been built yet at this time. But I think, it is my opinion, that the artist is showing us what's going to happen, like he's showing the whole sweep, that this is going to happen, the storm clouds will roll in, but they will win, and Rome will rise, and this will be the result, this sort of building that represents what's going to happen later. I don't know. That's just my reading. Maybe the artist intended something completely different. Yes, like their whole future is summed up in this one moment. He's going to shoot that deer and war's going to break out, but it's going to it's all going to lead to the founding of Rome, which is kind of cool. So I like that painting. So this is what Alecto does. And everyone comes to Latinus. Amata is already harping on him, right? Turnus comes in and says, what is the deal? What? You got to go find foreigners? What's wrong with me? What am I? Well, I'm not good enough for your daughter anymore? And then the neighboring countryside people come in and say, they're killing our pets. They started by killing our pets, but then they started killing us. Of course, they maybe conveniently left out the fact that they attacked the Romans for killing the deer. Then they started killing us. You need to declare war. But Latinus, oh, it's such a bad spot. Oh my gosh, the gods told me to marry my daughter to this guy. I'm pretty sure he's the guy. But now my whole people want there to be war. And I left this part out. I already made a treaty with him. You can just leave it on the table, Ella, when you're done. And it says, the temple of Janus, when the fathers had given their voice for war, then the consul himself in robe and girdle opens the gate with his own hand, and the people follow him, and there's great blowing of horns. But King Latinus, though the people bade him declare war and open the gate, would have nothing to do with it. He hid himself. So Juno herself came down and opened the gate. All right. I see that we have time issues, so I'm just going to sort of get us up to where we are and just kind of creatively tell the story. Aeneas needs help. And the gods say, go up the river. A guy named Evander. He's your man. And he goes up and he hangs out with Evander. Evander has a son named Pallas. And he says, I am going to give you help. I am going to give you my son Pallas. He can go with you and he can learn the arts of war because I'm an old man. Also, Aeneas, you should know something else. My nearby neighbors, they have a king named Mezentius, and he's just a complete rotter. And they threw him out. They hate Mezentius. And guess what? Mezentius went and joined Turnus. I think those people will join you so they can go fight against their old king Mezentius and his new ally Turnus, which does indeed happen. But he lacks one thing still, Aeneas, of being like the great heroes. You know, Achilles got armor custom made by the gods. So Aeneas' mom, Venus, comes and she says, will you make my son armor? You made Achilles armor. He does. He gets the god armor. Achilles had an amazing shield. If you remember, it talked about it in our Trojan War book. Pictures of cities and the countryside and the world as it is. But Aeneas gets a different kind of shield. He gets the future of Rome on his shield. And it says, there you saw Horatius holding the bridge. And here you saw Numa giving laws. And here's the geese squawking to save the capital and all the famous stories. And right smack in the middle is the Emperor Augustus fighting Antony and Cleopatra, which we'll talk about in a couple of months. And so he shows up again. Turnus is raging. His guys are attacking the camp. And Aeneas is on his way home. Well, before he gets there, a couple of guys in the camp, guys you've met before, Nisus and Euryalus. They said, you know what? Somebody needs to go tell Aeneas we're in trouble. Wouldn't it be awesome if we did that? We could sneak out, Everybody'd love us. It's awesome. We'll sneak out. We'll sneak up the Tiber, and we'll go find him and tell him he needs to get back pronto. You in for it? Like, you betcha. So they go out together. Do you remember where we've met these guys before? They were the foot racers. Nisus fell down in a pool of blood, and he tripped the next guy so his buddy Euryalus could win. Well, they go out. Well, the enemy is asleep. They're everywhere. I can't resist. I got to kill some of them and take their stuff. So we do. And hey, love the helmet. Going to put the helmet on. Euryalus, it's a full moon tonight. And the moon's going to shine right off that helmet. And it does. And some of the Turnus's troops, new troops coming in, said, what's that? What's that light moving around over there? They run for it, and Nisus gets away, but Euryalus doesn't. But just like in the foot race, Nisus has to go help his friend. I have to help my friend. So he starts yelling, over here, this way, look, come get me, catch me if you can. And you're like, yeah, we're going to kill this guy first, and then we're going to get you. And they do, and it ends up with Nisus dead on Euryalus' body. They died together in a pool of blood, just like the foot race. Aeneas comes back just in the nick of time with light blazing from this amazing god armor and routs them. But it's not over yet. All right? Finish it, and we will talk about the ending next week. And I think I need to let you guys go. Have a lovely week. Thank you for your attention. This was a fun day. I love telling the stories. So fun. All right. See you next week. Be careful. I was going to say, be careful driving in the snow. Like any of you are driving. None of you are driving. Jesse, you were driving? Well, be careful in the snow if you are driving in it.